All right. Hello, everybody. We are so glad that you're tuning in wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to the Between Sundays podcast. I am joined today by a legend. They're going to build a statue of her one day outside of Thompson Station Church, right where the circle is in front of the C building. I am joined by Jorja Gus. Jorja, how you feel today?
I'm awesome. How are you?
Good. I'm just glad to be sitting with a legend who has her own podcast, own books, author, renowned podcaster. It's a joy to be in your presence today, Jorja.
It's a joy to be in yours, Sam.
No, Jorja, we've been in this Made for More series. I'm putting you on the spot here, everybody. This is not planned. We did not talk before. I've got some questions. I'm putting her on the spot. What has been your favorite part so far about this series?
Man, this series has honestly called me out in a bunch of different ways because sometimes I feel like I put God in a box, you know? I think that, okay, God, you can do this much, but can he do more?
Yeah.
And I mean, every single week I'm reminded that I'm made for more, one, but that God can do so much more through me.
Yeah.
It's been amazing.
I'm really glad, as we talked about the book of Ephesians, that people came up with a theme that are much smarter than I am of made for more. Because I just love that when you think about the book of Ephesians and then you think about that phrase, I just think there's so much in the book that speaks to that phrase. We've been talking about it, but the first 3 chapters are about what we find in Jesus. The next 3 are kind of like how we practice that. But there is so much more when it comes to God, when it comes to knowing him, when it comes to our faith, and when it comes to what he is calling us to do in our life. And I think so many of us settle for less, and God has so much more in store for us. What would you say to anybody today that might be settling for less, might not even know they're settling for less on that topic?
I would say, remember who your God is. I was talking actually to our young adults on Thursday, and I was like, do you want to know who my God is? And I was just going off. I was like, he's my healer. He is my redeemer. He is my savior. And when you remember who he is, you're reminded of like, okay, I can do this because of him. You can't do it because of yourself. You can only do it through him.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I wonder sometimes, do we actually believe the God of the Bible? I wonder that because we read the stories about the miracles. You know, we were just chatting before, joking around a little bit about different things and series and stuff, but we were talking a little bit about Exodus. And it's like, do we really believe of the God that parted the Red Sea? Do we really believe in the God that helped David defeat Goliath, who was a giant? Do we really believe in the God that literally made the sun stand still and it didn't set? And do we really believe in the God that said, let there be light, and there was light? And I just wonder, you go back to your first statement about putting God in a box. If sometimes we don't even intentionally, we would never say this, but even those of us that maybe believe in Christ and come to church, we look at the Bible sometimes as just this good book full of stories, but we forget that same God is still with us today, alive and active, that his spirit resides within us. What are ways that you remind yourself that God is still active and alive just like he was in the past?
You know, I think we were talking about this earlier, but I go back to where I've seen God. And I think it's even in Psalms whenever David is constantly reminding himself of like, okay, I've seen God do this, I've seen God do that. And he remembers what he's done in the past so that he can keep on going in faith. And that's what I do in my life. Like when I am doubting God or if I'm worried, I am constantly going back to where I saw him last.
Yeah.
And, you know, those big miracles that we see in the Bible, yes, they're huge and they're awesome, but God works even in the small miracles.
That's right.
And even in my smallest miracles that I've seen in my own life, that's what keeps me going. It's not the big moments, it's even the smaller moments.
Do you feel like a lot of times you had to take a step of faith?
Oh, always.
Yeah.
It's always a step of faith in my life. I feel like I'm constantly living in that step of faith kind of mindset.
But I wonder if that's where sometimes, if you're listening today, I wonder if sometimes that's the problem we have, is we want to see God move, but we're not willing to take a step of faith. Because to take a step of faith means we have to get uncomfortable. It means we have to get out of our comfort zone. That means we have to take a step where we could fail, where we're not relying on ourselves, that we're trusting God. But when we do take a step of faith, and you know the scripture says without faith it's impossible to please God. But when we take that faith step, we're reminded of more of who God is and what God can do. I heard someone say one time, it actually I think might have been a pastor friend of Chris and I, but he was talking about how he basically was being challenged by an older pastor, and he called him and just said, "Man, how do you have so much faithfulness? How do you have so much faith?
Yeah.
And his reply was basically just something along the lines of, hey, I don't have that much more. I've just had more time to be able to see God move and see God work time and time again, which has built me up over time to trust God and to know that he comes through. And so I think the more we take steps of faith, man, the more we trust God, the more we see God, the more we experience God, and the more we build up a life of faithfulness. And so today, I want to challenge you right off the bat. What step of faith are you taking? What can you step out and do that you normally wouldn't do? Where can you trust God where you're not trusting God? Where can you try something different where you've never tried something different? And what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail if God didn't come through? And every once in a while, more than listening, more than reading, we got to put action to our faith and actually take some steps toward that. Let's talk a little bit about yesterday. What do you want to talk about yesterday-wise, Jorja?
Man, whenever you kept on saying the word light, I feel like a lot of people, yes, they want that light, but I think a lot of people are wanting the limelight as well.
That's good.
There's
Expand on that. Keep going.
A difference.
Don't stop.
With the limelight, it's where you're wanting the spotlight on yourself, and you're wanting those achievements and those titles and things to glorify you.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know, I was thinking about it the other day too, with just the limelight is so attractive and everyone wants to be in the limelight. And so whenever you have the light of Jesus and you want that light to shine, you're not glorifying yourself anymore, you're glorifying him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's a huge difference. You got to ask yourself, which light are you actually wanting to go through?
I think that's a great point. And I think a lot of people talk about this in a lot of different ways. Really good communicators, and I think we're not helping if we don't get a little bit honest. There's a little bit of them that likes captivating a room and eyes on them. Really good communicators.
Yeah.
And the tendency with that could be that all of a sudden what God has gifted them with, they turn into eyes on them instead of eyes on God. And I think that's why you see so many fall. And even the term celebrity pastor, I want to just talk to this just for a second, because the term itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, because someone might come to celebrity status as a pastor just by being faithful. But someone also might come to a celebrity status because they just wanted the fame and they put themselves out there in certain ways and they only wanted that. But some guys, man, they've grown to fame not because they wanted that, but because they were just faithful day by day and God made their platform bigger.
Right.
I think it really comes back to who's building the platform.
Right.
Are they trying to build the platform for themselves, or is God building the platform? And eventually, even if it doesn't happen fast, we've seen it multiple times, time will tell.
Yes.
If they were building it, it will fall, and the fall will be hard, and the pride will be crumbled.
Right.
But if God is building it, it will last. You're familiar with social media very well. Jorja does communications for us at church. Maybe even talk to us about communication, social media, how that plays in with platform, limelight, all that kind of stuff in today's time.
Sure. So I'm going to tell you a story, actually.
Yeah.
Can I tell you a story?
Absolutely.
So there was one time, I do TikTok as well for my ministry.
Yeah.
And it was growing fast.
Yeah.
And I remember just thinking like, wow, like this is so great. Like people are wanting this. And I kept on thinking to myself, like the devil was trying to get in there. And he's like, yeah, you're getting all these numbers. That means you're getting really good. And I started shifting my platform to like, oh, maybe it's for me now, which it never should be. But it was one of the things I stopped myself. I said, no.
Yeah.
I'm doing this for the audience of one, not for the audience of 10,000s, if anything like that.
Yeah.
But even with social media, I see it every day. And you just have to learn the heart of that person, I think, because the Lord knows the heart. And He knows the intention behind everything. But what you're posting, is it meant to glorify Him? Is it meant to make His name famous? Or is it meant to make your name famous?
Yeah. And I think it's a daily dying to self. I think every single person has to make sure they pick up their cross daily to follow Jesus. They have to make sure that everything they're doing is for His glory, not his glory. And I think it's also probably a battle at times for people. I think they have to remind themselves to get on their knees and pray and say, God, I'm humbling myself before I go out here. And then I think they have to remember that, all of us have to remember that, hey, we might be able to make great achievements by the world standards, and we might experience success by the world standards, but we have to really ask deep down, are we experiencing success by God's standard? The world can build a crowd, and the world can build a following, but it's very different when you're talking about building disciples. But you're right. It can be so easy to turn into something we do. I remember one time I was down in Pensacola, Florida. Not Pensacola, Florida. Laguna Beach. Where's that at? Panama City. Panama City. And I was down there. Gosh, doesn't the beach sound nice right now?
Wonderful.
Be wonderful. I want to go there on fall break. All you people will be gone here in a couple of weeks on fall break. We'll have Williamson County all on 30A. Make sure you tune in to live stream. But I was down and I was preaching for a church, First Baptist, Selmer, Tennessee, in West Tennessee, middle of nowhere. The most country people you've ever met in your life. I had little middle school girls coming up to me asking if I hunt and all this kind of stuff. Great people, though. I can't share the games they played on here, but it was unbelievable. But I went to preach that night, and I remember thinking to myself, as I look back, hey, I've preached this certain message a lot. I've used this illustration a lot, and a lot of people have come to Christ when I use this message. And that night, I think maybe like one person, it wasn't a big group, but only like one person. I was kind of down and thinking, man, what happened? What went wrong? And that kind of stuff. And I remember just getting like one of those moments where it just feels like God hits you in the face, or punches you in the chest. Right. And I remember just having this feeling of God speaking to me, saying, you put more faith in a message than in me. And I've never forgot that moment, that at the end of the day, I could preach the worst message I've ever preached. But if I'm relying and depending upon God and He's there, He can do all kinds of things.
That's true.
But if I am preaching the best message I've ever preached and He's not there, nothing could happen.
Wow.
And it's just always been a reminder to me that to put our faith ultimately in Him and not in what we can do, but more of what He can do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything else from Ephesians 5 stuck out?
Let's see. I also had a question for you.
Oh gosh!
I didn't get to ask you after the sermon, but
I didn't get any warning about this question.
As I've walked through many different seasons of my life, and before I truly, gave everything to Him and lived a life by faith, I was in that comfortable phase where I was having one foot in the world and then one foot with Him. And I was wondering if you could speak more on that, because I know a lot of people on this podcast, they also want to know more about that. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. I think a lot of us have probably been where you're describing. And we had a moment where we encountered Christ, and we've had moments where we've been more on fire, but then somehow we get complacent in a certain situation or a certain season in our life where we're just fully not going all out for Jesus. I'll go back to some of the simple things, and it's not always the case, but some of the indicators in my life in those seasons were how much time was I spending with the Lord? Who did I have around me? Like, who was influencing me? I would say that was one of the major ones, is who was around me. Yeah. Because when I was with people that weren't always on fire for Christ, it was really easy to put my fire out and to do what they were doing and to have one foot in and one foot out. And it's hard to be alone. None of us really want to be alone. And there were certain seasons in my life where I had to say, hey, I'm going to have to find new friends, and that's going to take a while, but I'm not doing the same things I used to do. And then I would just say, finding that calling that God had placed in my life and on my life, and actually practicing that calling. There was just some moments where I finally stepped into what I knew God created me to do. And I was like, I never want to do anything else.
Wow.
And that doesn't mean there's not seasons of doubt and things like that, but it was just like that confirmation of all right, this is what God has called me to do. This is what He can do. I've seen Him work. I've seen Him move, and I don't want to do anything else. And I think once you begin to see God work, and once you begin to see God actually move, there's nothing like it.
There's nothing like it. It's
and you don't
crazy.
Want to do anything else. I remember I went to again, early on. These are early on stories, but I preached at a church, and it was like one of the first messages I ever preached, and actually told the same story I told Sunday about Nathan Johnson, who passed away at 16 years old. And I keep that message outline, fun story, in my Bible from that day. It's one of the first messages I ever preached. I still have it where I hand wrote it on a piece of paper and put all these scriptures and all these stories, so it's like all crinkled up and rolled up in my Bible. But I keep it in my Bible for this reason. I never want to forget what God can do, because that night I had no business preaching. It was probably the worst message people had ever heard. It was terrible delivery, terrible in so many ways, so many elements. Had no business doing it. But man, God, it's like the Spirit of the Lord just fell out that night, and people just came to the altar. People gave their life to Jesus. And I'll never forget this girl, as I was leaving, just tears in her eyes, streaming down her face. She said, "Thank you. You helped me find Jesus tonight."
Wow.
And I remember leaving just going like, hey, this had nothing to do with what I just did, but it had everything to do with who God is and what God does. And I just thought, man, if I can be obedient and I get to be a part of that, I don't ever want to do anything else.
Yeah.
And even now I'm like, God, what more do you want to do in and through me and in and through us as a church and in and through us as a staff? And I don't ever want to get just complacent with what you said earlier, that we serve the God of the universe. Like I'm still believing more today. I get frustrated when I get in the weeds and the how, and I had a meeting with Chris before this, and even I left going, did we accomplish anything, that kind of stuff. But it's so important for me to do those things, not because of the strategy, but like I want our staff to be the best we can be and the most spiritually prepared we can be, because I just believe God has so much more for us. I believe there's more people that need to come into a relationship with Jesus. I believe there's more marriages that need to be restored. I believe there's more people that need to be set free from addiction. I believe there's more kids that need to say yes to Jesus for the very first time. I believe there's families that need to be changed for generations. And I'm getting passionate because every time I think about the reasons I don't want to step into what God wants me to do, I'm always thinking about how he works, how he moves, and that one more person that needs him. And when I remember those moments, I go, why would I do anything else?
Right.
And
Come
why
on,
would I want to
Sam.
be a part of anything else? I'm ready to run now. But I just think too, for every person that comes in and sits on a Sunday morning, there is so much more. And like my prayer today would be that you could just get a small taste of God using you and see your neighbor come to know Jesus, see your coworker come to. I think the reason that's so hard for us is the enemy, one, hates it and hates the life change. But I think once people get a taste of my neighbor came to know Jesus and God used me and I got to baptize him on a Sunday morning, that's contagious.
It is contagious. I was just about to say that. Like
You don't
once
stop.
you see God work, you're just like, I want to see it again and again and again.
Absolutely. I think that's why a lot of the best evangelists you see in the church, like they've got stories of so many people they've won to Christ, but they've experienced it.
Right.
But I do want to speak to everyone today, and George, you can speak to this after I say it, but like, I think that we think that we're not equipped enough, and it's our job to equip them to do it. What would you say to people who go, hey, I want to be a part of more. I want to share the gospel. I want to do all the things that Sam's talking about passionately, but I don't know how. I don't know where to start, and I don't even know how to have that conversation.
Yeah. I would honestly, if I could talk to that person right now, I wish that when they look in the mirror, they see what God sees. Just someone who is equipped, not because of what they can do, but what God can do through them. And all you have to do, like whenever I started my ministry, all I said was like, Lord, I'm yours. You just do whatever you want to do through me now. And whenever I had that posture of having that open heart with open hands, that's when the Lord decided saying, okay, here you go.
Yeah.
And he let me open through like a small little door, but because I walked through that door, the Lord just kept opening up bigger ones.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because there is no way in this world that I'm able to do what I do today without him.
Yeah.
I can't do it. But it's such a testimony because I get to tell every story about my life and say it's all because of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever, I'm just having this thought right now, and if one comes to mind, tell us. But I sometimes wonder, like, I'll tell people sometimes how God equipped me.
Yeah.
But I don't always go into, and we've talked about it a little bit today already, how ill-equipped I felt before I did something.
Wow.
And I think everyone can resonate with that feeling.
Yeah.
Have you had that feeling a lot?
Wow. Let me tell you. I actually was telling Pastor Chris this morning, but every time I get on a stage, I have a miniature heart attack, Sam. Like my heart beats out of my chest, out of my chest. And whenever I was speaking to the kids on Wednesday, I kept asking, I was like, Lord, like, I'm terrified, but I know you're going to speak through me. And then I read Exodus 4, I believe, and it's like the Lord saying, like, who put the mouth on a human? Who speaks through you?
That's
and I'm
good.
like, all right, Lord, like, you're going to do that. And when I went on that stage, I wasn't scared anymore. And it's nothing like of the fancy words that I say, because I didn't say anything fancy, Sam. Nothing. I just said, Lord, okay, you just speak through me.
Yeah.
But because I'd had that step of obedience and I did it, instead of letting fear win and having my heart just, implode, And we all know fear is from
Yeah.
the devil, and that's what
Yeah.
he doesn't want you to do, is
That's
step
right.
out in obedience. And so instead of choosing fear, I chose faith.
It's good.
And I went
It's
out.
good.
And because I did that, Sam, it's crazy. But it's one of my favorite stories now, is because 7 babies accepted Jesus
Come
that
on.
night.
Come on now.
Now I'm like, okay, let's keep
Come
going.
on.
Let's keep going.
Kids ministry, right?
Yes,
Yeah. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
awesome. This was on Wednesday night, this past Wednesday, right?
Last week, Sam, I'm
So
still ready
awesome.
to run through a wall. I'm ready.
In the kids ministry, not actual babies.
Not
but-
babies. I'm sorry. I
but,
meant kids.
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 Georgia's
Kids.
speaking to just how precious they were.
Oh, precious babies. They were 3rd through 5th graders. My bad, guys. My bad.
But I want to finish with this, Georgia, because it's so true what you just said. Like, people don't realize this, but I am still nervous every Sunday before I get up and preach.
Really?
And people will ask, "Do you still get nervous?" Yes. But what's changed is, even though I'm nervous, I just know God is gonna still come through.
Always.
And I have to remind myself. And even are there other items that I don't feel equipped to do? Are there times I don't want to talk to someone about Jesus, or I'm afraid to talk to someone about Jesus, or afraid to do something God's calling me to? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just want to speak to anyone today listening as we close. Like, if you have some fear of taking that next step, or you don't feel equipped, you're in good company. But just know this: take that step of faith, get out of your comfort zone, because God can use you, and God can do something great for you, through you, and for your life. He has so much more for your life. So don't get complacent.
Right.
Take a step of faith and watch God move and watch God work. Hey, this has been fun.
Been the best time ever.
Have a great week, everybody. See you later.